Who was the single wealthiest person to have ever lived? It's a question that always starts a debate. We think of modern titans of industry, names like Musk or Bezos, whose fortunes are counted in the hundreds of billions. We might look back to the Industrial Revolution, to figures like Rockefeller or Carnegie, who could buy and sell nations. But according to historians, the richest person to ever walk the earth wasn't a tech mogul or an oil baron. He was a 14th century West African king whose fortune was so staggering, so utterly beyond comprehension, that there's really no way to put an accurate number on it. His name was Mansa Musa, the Emperor of Mali, and his wealth was so legendary that a single act of religious devotion would send an economic shockwave across the known world, shattering the value of gold and plunging one of the world's most powerful cities into a decade of financial chaos. In 1324, this one man embarked on a 4,000-mile religious pilgrimage that was so extravagant, so impossibly lavish, he single-handedly crashed the economy of every city he visited. This isn't a metaphor, he literally broke the gold market, and by all accounts he did it through sheer unadulterated generosity. This is the story of Mansa Musa, the richest man in all of human history, and how his journey to Mecca didn't just showcase his personal wealth. It broke the financial world and put his African kingdom at the very center of it. It's a story that challenges our understanding of wealth, power, and the forgotten history of an empire that once held a staggering amount of the world's gold in its hands. To understand how one man could wield such earth-shattering economic power, you first have to understand the empire he commanded. The Mali Empire, flourishing in the 13th and 14th centuries, was a titan of West Africa. At its peak under Mansa Musa, it stretched for thousands of miles, encompassing lands that are now part of modern-day Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, the Gambia, and Guinea. It was one of the largest empires on the planet at the time, and while much of Europe was mired in famine, plague, and war, the Mali Empire was a realm of immense prosperity and stability. The secret to this almost mythical wealth was simple, but it was total. The empire sat at the crossroads of the two most valuable commodities of the medieval world, salt and gold. This was the heart of the trans-Saharan trade, a network of brutal but lucrative routes that were the economic arteries of 3 continents. From the north, merchants drove vast camel caravans across the desert, carrying massive slabs of salt. In West Africa's climate, salt wasn't just for flavor. It was essential for preserving food and for life itself, and in some places it was literally worth its weight in gold. And that gold, it came from the south. The lands controlled by the Mali Empire were home to some of the most productive gold mines on Earth. It's estimated that during Musa's reign, the Mali Empire was the source of almost half of the Old World's gold supply. The Mansa, the emperor, held exclusive rights to every solid gold nugget found, ensuring a constant, unimaginable flow of wealth directly into his treasury. Mali didn't just participate in this trade, it mastered it. The empire taxed every caravan that passed through, controlling the supply of gold moving north and salt moving south, positioning itself as the indispensable broker in a continental exchange of riches. They also traded ivory, spices, and other goods, creating a powerful economic machine. Into this world of staggering wealth was born Musa around 1280. He wasn't actually destined for the throne. He ascended to power in 1312 under the most extraordinary circumstances. His predecessor, Mansa Abu Bakr II, was obsessed with the great Atlantic Ocean to his west. According to the story Musa himself told, Abu Bakr first sent an expedition of 200 boats to find the ocean's edge. Only one returned. Undeterred, the emperor decided to lead a second, grander expedition himself. In 1312, with a fleet of thousands of vessels, he appointed his deputy Musa to rule in his absence and sailed west, never to be seen again. Though some historians question if this story was a convenient justification for Musa's rise to power, it's how he claimed the throne. And so, Mansa Musa became the 9th Mansa of Mali. He quickly proved to be a brilliant administrator and commander, expanding the empire's borders by annexing 24 cities, including the vital trade hubs of Timbuktu and Gao. But more than a conqueror, Mansa Musa was a devout Muslim. He saw it as his sacred duty to complete the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. For the Emperor of Mali, affording it wasn't going to be an issue, but this would be no simple journey. This was a chance to put his empire, a realm largely unknown to the wider world, on the map. It was a chance to announce Mali's power and piety on the world stage, and he would do it with an entrance so spectacular it would be talked about for centuries. The preparations were monumental. This wasn't just a caravan, it was a mobile city. In 1324, when Mansa Musa set out from his capital, he was accompanied by a procession that defied belief. Arab chroniclers of the time were left scrambling for words. The procession consisted of 60,000 people. This included the entire royal court, officials, merchants, scholars, and a massive military escort. Then there was the entourage dedicated to his personal service. This included a retinue of 12,000 slaves, every one of them clad in fine Persian silk and brocade. At the head of it all marched 500 heralds, also in silk, each carrying a staff made of pure gold weighing about 6 pounds. They were there to announce the coming of their king, a river of gold flowing across the Sahara. The gold itself was transported on a baggage train of 80 to 100 camels. Each camel was loaded with up to 300 pounds, or 136 kilograms, of gold dust. Just this part of the caravan alone carried somewhere between 12 and 18 tons of pure gold, and that was just his spending money for the trip. His total net worth is estimated to be the equivalent of over $400 billion today, making him wealthier than anyone alive. This river of humanity and wealth began its slow 4,000-mile trek north, a journey that took nearly a year. They followed the Niger River before turning into the brutal Sahara Desert. The logistics were mind-boggling. They were a moving city that needed food and water every day in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. It is said that Mansa Musa commissioned the construction of a new mosque every Friday, wherever his caravan happened to stop. For the people of the towns they passed, it must have been like a vision from a dream, a glittering line of gold and silk stretching for miles across the desolate landscape. Mansa Musa's generosity became legendary. He showered the local poor with gold dust, and he bought goods from local merchants for whatever price they asked, vastly overpaying for simple souvenirs. This wasn't just charity, it was a message. This is the wealth of Mali. After months of crossing the Sahara, the Golden City finally arrived at the threshold of the medieval world center of power and culture, Cairo. Ruled by the Mamluk Sultan, Al-Malik al-Nasir, Cairo was a global hub of trade, scholarship, and politics. The arrival of Mansa Musa and his 60,000-person entourage in July 1324 was an event Cairo would never forget. What followed was a 3-month stay that would begin in spectacle and end in economic catastrophe. When Mansa Musa entered Cairo, it was an immediate sensation. The people of Cairo were used to wealth, but they had never seen anything like this. Years later, the historian Al-Umari visited the city and found people still buzzing with stories of the Malian emperor's piety, dignity, and above all, his insane spending. A delicate diplomatic moment arose when he was scheduled to meet the Sultan. Custom demanded that visitors kiss the ground before him, but Mansa Musa refused. He was an emperor in his own right and would only prostrate himself before God. In a masterful diplomatic move, he entered the court, recited a prayer, and then kissed the ground, declaring he was doing so for Allah, not the Sultan. Impressed, the Sultan treated him as an honored guest. With formalities handled, Mansa Musa did what he'd been doing all along, giving away gold. But Cairo wasn't a remote oasis. It was the economic heart of the Mediterranean. He gave gold to every court official. He gave it to the poor on the streets. His followers descended on the city's markets, buying silks, spices, and books at any price. Merchants, seeing a golden opportunity, wildly inflated their prices. Imagine someone walking down Wall Street just handing out stacks of $100 bills. That's essentially what happened to gold in Cairo. Mansa Musa poured so much gold into the city that he completely broke the law of supply and demand. Gold, the very standard of wealth, suddenly became common. The economic effect was swift and devastating. The value of gold plummeted. According to Al-Umari, the price of gold dropped by as much as 25% and didn't recover for over a decade. For the people of Cairo, this was a disaster. Their savings were suddenly worth less. The price of everyday goods like bread and cloth skyrocketed. A single man's generosity had inadvertently crippled the economy of one of the world's great powers. And then came the final irony. After months of lavish spending, the richest man in the world ran out of money. Having given away tons of gold, Mansa Musa had to borrow for his return journey. He went back to the very same Cairo merchants and money lenders his spending had just enriched. But now he had to borrow at outrageous interest rates. The pilgrimage, meant to demonstrate limitless wealth, had found its limit. The collision with Cairo was complete, and the world would never look at West Africa the same way again. The story of Mansa Musa is a powerful reminder of how much of our world's history has been left in the shadows. If you believe these stories are vital and want to see more of them brought to light, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us tell the tales that history forgot. The journey home from Mecca was a different affair. Mansa Musa had a new mission. His attempt to undo the economic damage in Cairo by borrowing back gold showed he was aware of the chaos he'd caused, but while the Egyptian economy would remain depressed for more than a decade, the real impact of his journey wasn't what he left behind, but what he brought back to Mali. This was no longer just a caravan of gold, it was a caravan of intellect. Exposed to the great centers of learning in Cairo and Mecca, Mansa Musa became a voracious recruiter. He persuaded scholars, poets, and architects from across the Arab world to return with him to Mali. The most famous of these was an Andalusian poet and architect named Abu Ishaq al-Sahili. When Mansa Musa returned to his empire around 1325, he found it had actually grown. While he was away, his top general had continued his campaigns, annexing the Songhai capital of Gao. Musa now ruled a larger, more powerful, and, thanks to his pilgrimage, a world-famous empire. And he immediately set about transforming it. The gold that had crashed Cairo's economy was now repurposed to fuel one of the greatest intellectual flowerings in African history. The focus was the city of Timbuktu. Using the expertise of architects like al-Sahili, Musa launched a massive building program. He commissioned the legendary Jingreba Mosque, a masterpiece of earth and wood architecture that still stands today. But his most enduring legacy was turning Timbuktu into a world-class centre of learning. He established Islamic schools known as madrasas and libraries. The Sankore Mosque was expanded into the University of Sankore, which became one of the most important intellectual hubs in the world. It attracted scholars and students from all over Africa and the Middle East to study law, medicine, astronomy, and theology, eventually housing hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. The pilgrimage, therefore, wasn't just a display of wealth, it was a catalyst. It connected the once isolated Mali Empire directly to the intellectual heartbeat of the Islamic world. The gold that disrupted one economy was used to build another, an economy based not just on trade, but on knowledge. The journey that began as a quest for spiritual fulfillment ended in a cultural revolution. Mansa Musa didn't just put Mali on the map. The famous Catalan Atlas of 1375 would depict him on a golden throne, holding a giant gold nugget. He turned his empire into a beacon of scholarship that would shine long after its gold mines ran dry. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage did, in a very real sense, break the economy. It shattered the financial balance of the Mediterranean by devaluing its most precious commodity. But it also shattered the world's perception of Africa. In an era when many in Europe and the Middle East had only vague ideas about the lands south of the Sahara, Mansa Musa arrived as an undeniable force of wealth, power, and sophistication. He forced the world to recognize that a powerful, organized, and staggeringly rich empire existed in West Africa. His legacy is complex. He was a man of great piety whose generosity caused a decade-long recession. He was an emperor whose wealth was built on controlling trade, which included enslaved people. Yet, he was also a visionary who used that same wealth to start a golden age of education and culture, creating institutions that would rival any in the world. The story of Mansa Musa is more than just a tale of unimaginable riches. It's a story about how interconnected the medieval world really was, where the actions of a West African king could have massive consequences thousands of miles away. It shows that true wealth isn't just what you have, but what you build with it. His journey may have broken the old economic order, but in its wake, he built a legacy of knowledge and culture that enriched the world, cementing his place not just as the richest man in history, but as one of its most transformative figures.